Hello everyone, welcome to this audio podcast. Welcome to this audio podcast aligned to this audio podcast series, the ZtormTronix case review. This is an audio podcast aligned to what works in around nephrology and with how do young people with CKD cope, and what are the experiences between pediatric renal services and adult renal care. This is an audio podcast aligned to a Storm Robotics RFPB, and an audio podcast aligned to the design sort of the design methodology and setting in around this sort of in around this sort of works. So in line to sort of the sort of plan of investigation. Um, uh, um, uh, to begin with, in around sort of the sort of the design and some aspects around the methodology. So this will be this works has been documented as a sort of longitudinal observational investigation, with a view to explore how young people between 14 to 25 with CKD, pre and post transplant, cope, and to understand how coping amongst these young people changes can sort of change how coping amongst young people changes in context of longitudinal from a longitudinal basis, and how coping impacts on individuals or patients lives, collecting data over an 18-month duration. One validated survey will sort to be implemented at time point 0 months, 6 months, one validated survey will be implemented or sought to be implemented at a sort of a halfway duration, at time points, at a half sorry at a halfway point, point for both for both patients, and potentially for siblings to also complete as well. This research will sort to implement mixed methodology to collect data. Similar methodology has been implemented in retrospective works by Webb and team in 2010. The appointed research sort of lead will sort to explore how outcomes relating to coping and transition of young people vary at dedicated time points. In line to the qualitative arm of this, the qualitative side of this works. There's in line with the qualitative aspects are aligned to this works, wherein one to one, wherein there's a sort of a sort of appointed perspective, where one to one face to face interviews would be implemented, and where all participants would be invited to attend one-to-one interviews in between and at sort of different pediatric pediatric hospitals or pediatric sites in context of nephrology, in context of nephrology departments. Semi-structured questions would be used or sought as prompts, surrounding several themes in around, for example, coping, coping and coping and transitioning, and specific semi-structured themes and questions relating to coping will relate to, for example, will be in regards to number one, reflecting back; number two, communication; number three, coping ways; number four, planning; and number five, responses and reactions. In line to sort of transition based questions. These will relate to, or be relate to, before transferring to adult renal services, during the transfer process, and after transitioning, and ongoing care in context and specific to the quantitative, from the quantitative basis, where in around this works, there will be an invite or invitation to complete the ways of coping survey, wherein up to 100 young people in CKD, in CKD and in CKD and context of CKD at varying stages, and also siblings between those in between particular hospital children's hospital sites, for example, will be invited to complete a survey, the ways of coping survey, on paper or online, at halfway time point. So, for example, where the works is where this research has been documented to be implemented over an 18-month duration, at halfway time point, at 9 months. There will be the invitation to complete the ways of coping surveys, where participants, young people with CKD and potentially siblings, will have an invitation to complete the ways of coping survey, either as a paper version or an online version at a halfway time point, and will only have to where participants will be invited to complete the ways of coping survey only once only. And additional pediatric renal sites may be recruited through for example, the Medicines Children's Research Network, or the MCRN, and so in line to this as well, in context of sort of the aligned to the design and methodology and the setting, specifically in around the sort of the recruitment of participants. Young people or siblings attached to pediatric renal sites would be initially approached, or potentially initially approached, through the Medicines Children's Network, or Medicines Children Research Network, or MCRN, who will provide who can or should be able to put who can or would provide would be able to provide, or should be able to provide recruitment support, or support in context, in some context, and in around this is, again, from the qualitative side, is where potentially four sites for pediatric renal sites would be sought to sought to be involved, potentially approached and involved in this research in context in context of part of the sort of recruitment process, or part of the recruitment process. And in around again the quantitative side, the participants would be recruited from the same pediatric renal sites wherein up to 100 young people in CKD, up to 100 young people in CKD at various stages, and siblings would be approached would be approached or invited to complete the way a survey, or questionnaire on paper in paper format, or on as an online format. Aligned to this as well, all young people will be in context of the qualitative side of the research. It will be where there all young people would be invited to contribute in at least in at least one or single face-to-face interview, and in context of the survey or the questionnaire, where participants again would be invited to complete the survey on a paper or online format, and at sort of at sort of the halfway point during the sort of data part of the data collection process. In around the sort of analysis, the sort of the part of the sort of analysis basis or process. In around the qualitative analysis, young people or siblings will be invited to contribute again in a single face-to-face or one-to-one interview, where young people would be young people who participate in one-to-one or single face-to-face interviews, for example, would be invited at time 0 months, 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months sort of time. Where there will be one single face-to-face interviews, but once only during each time over time time 0 months, 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months. So there'll be a single face-to-face interview at each of those time points, at 6 months, at times 0 months, 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months time points. Interviews would be primarily audio recorded and transcribed. Interview data will be thematically analyzed using software, and aligned to the quantitative analysis. A minimum sample size of 50 young people with CKD, with chronic kidney disease at varying stages, and potentially at 50 siblings would be invited to complete a paper or online version of the Ways survey at halfway time point at 9 months, and descriptive summaries of baseline demographic and survey data will be analyzed using frequencies and descriptive statistics using software. Potentially multiple linear regressions also will be used to investigate association with age, gender, center, and treatment types. So, for example, transplanted or on another form of renal replacement therapy as part of the quantitative analysis. In line to the design methodology and setting as well, consent in line to design methodology and setting as well, consent and information sheets would be implemented. So all participants would be consented to complete an online version of the WAY survey and participating in one-to-one face-to-face interviews before the first data collection time point. The consent form and information sheet will inform the young person that involvement would be requested for 18 months, collecting data at 0 time point, 0 months, 6 months, at 12 months, and at 18-month time points. And involvement will be approximately in around 45 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes to complete 10 minutes will be used to complete to complete the survey, and 35 minutes for a face-to-face interview on the as part of the process. Consent forms and information sheets would be available for potential participants, parents and guardians, on a dedicated page of potentially the academic institution, and also on the organizational website, on an organizational website, the renal patient support group, the RPSG website. The online version of the WAY survey will also be made available through the potentially through both sort of websites, academic and the RPSG. In context of the sort of ethical considerations, the main ethical considerations will be ensuring safe data collection from young people with CKD, pre and post transplant, and siblings, involved in the research. An ethics application will be made potentially through and where applicable through the Integrated Research Application System, or IRAS, to gain ethics approval. Information sheets and consent forms will be provided to all young people, participants, and siblings who would like to participate in the research. Will be requested to seek or sort understanding from parents or guardians related in around the consent and assent before formal involvement. And data collected would be stored securely within an academic institution, and all participants will not all participants will not be identified in any sort of manuscript aligned to aligned to any manuscript being prepared for peer review publication in and around this works. In around the data storage, aligned to data storage, all information gathered during the investigation around the research would be kept secure at the academic institute at the appropriate academic institution for the duration of the research, and will be archived in around between 3 and 5 years after the study, after the investigation has been completed. A summary data suitable for secondary analysis will be available for a period or duration of up to 10 years, or a decade following, potentially up to a decade up to 10 years or a decade following the investigation on this particular application. In around sort of the sort of publication and dissemination aspects in around this works aligned to how do young people with CKD cope, and what are the experiences between pediatric renal services and adult renal care after completion. The applicant will submit a formal sort of research thesis under the academic institution, and also have a publication ready for an appropriate academic journal where results would be summarized. The data collected through this investigation will provide a robust sort of survey of coping strategies utilized by young people in CKD, and used by young people in CKD, and again potentially through data collection from potentially through siblings as well. And this research will help raise sort of the issues surrounding coping with CKD, and findings will be disseminated through the local NHS, for example, NHS trust in addition to specific renal related organizations such as for example the British Association of Paediatric Nephrology, and or for example the American Society of Pediatric Nephrology, etc., to help inform how specific forms of coping can enhance or improve life for renal recipients or patients. A presentation will be produced for participating sites, and for a formal, and in context of a formal conference aligned to sharing and dissemination of sort of the findings in around sort of the sort of outcome, or one of the outcomes in around this is sort of a proposition around a coping or transition clinical coping and transition sort of clinical guideline. And the main outcome for this is to propose a formal coping and transition guideline to complement clinical practice for young people suffering with CKD. Once longitudinal data has been collected, the main outcome of the research is to apart from to put forward a formal coping and transition guideline to complement clinical practice for young people suffering with CKD. The guideline a guideline would be the idea would be to also develop sort of further collaboration, such that the guideline could be tested. It could be tested in a small sort of a pilot investigation after initial data after research data collection in around this works has been sought, and Ultimately, a formal guideline would seek to offer a solution to improve coping and transition for young people with CKD. So that sort of ends closes on this audio podcast aligned to design methodology and setting. This has been an audio podcast aligned to the ZtormTronix case review v.3. This has been an audio podcast aligned to nephrology and how do young people with CKD cope, and what are the experiences between pediatric renal services and adult renal care. This has been an audio podcast aligned to a Storm Lobostic RFPB, and an audio podcast aligned to another Storm Lobostics production. Thanks for tuning in.